Live special report. From ABC News, this is President Reagan's address to the nation. Now, from our desk in Washington, here's Ted Koppel.
Good evening. Literally, from the first moments of his presidency on, President Reagan let it be known that his top priority is the nation's economy. Tonight, he delivers his first address to the nation since his inaugural. And what is expected is the Reagan roadmap for leading the nation out of its economic woes. Here then, from the Oval Office now, is the President of the United States.
Good evening. I'm speaking to you tonight to give you a report on the state of our nation's economy. I regret to say that we're in the worst economic mess since the Great Depression. A few days ago, I was presented with a report I'd asked for, a comprehensive audit, if you will, of our economic condition. You won't like it. I didn't like it. But we have to face the truth and then go to work to turn things around. And make no mistake about it, we can turn them around. I'm not going to subject you to the jumble of charts, figures, and economic jargon of that audit, but rather we'll try to explain where we are, how we got there, and how we can get back. First, however, let me just give a few attention getters from the audience. The federal budget is out of control, and we face runaway deficits of almost $80 billion for this budget year that ends September 30th. That deficit is larger than the entire federal budget in 1957. And so is the almost $80 billion we will pay in interest this year on the national debt. 20 years ago, in 1960, our federal government payroll was less than $13 billion. Today, it is $75 billion. During these 20 years, our population has only increased by 23.3%. The federal budget has gone up 528%. Now, we've just had 2 years of back-to-back double-digit inflation. 13.3% in 1979, 12.4% last year. The last time this happened was in World War I. In 1960, mortgage interest rates averaged about 6%. They're 2.5 times as high now, 15.4%. The percentage of your earnings the federal government took in taxes in 1960 has almost doubled. And finally, there are 7 million Americans caught up in the personal indignity and human tragedy of unemployment. If they stood in a line allowing 3 feet for each person, the line would reach from the coast of Maine to California. Well, so much for the audit itself. Let me try to put this in personal terms. Here is a dollar such as you earned, spent, or saved in 1960. And here is a quarter, a dime, and a penny. 36 cents. That's what this 1960 dollar is worth today. And at the present world inflation rate, and our rate should continue 3 more years, that dollar of 1960 will be worth a quarter. What initiative is there to save? And if we don't save, we're short of the investment capital needed for business and industry expansion. Workers in Japan and West Germany save several times the percentage of their income that Americans do. What's happened to that American dream of owning a home? Only 10 years ago, a family could buy a home and the monthly payment averaged little more than a quarter, 27 cents out of each dollar earned. Today, it takes 42 cents out of every dollar of income. So, fewer than 1 out of 11 families can afford to buy their first new home. Regulations adopted by government with the best of intentions have added $666 to the cost of an automobile. It is estimated that altogether, regulations of every kind on shopkeepers, farmers, and major industries add $100 billion or more to the cost of the goods and services we buy. And then another $20 billion is spent by government handling the paperwork created by those regulations. I'm sure you're getting the idea that the audit presented to me found government policies of the last few decades responsible for our economic troubles. We forgot or just overlooked the fact that government, any government, has a built-in tendency to grow. Now, we all had a hand in looking to government for benefits as if government had some source of revenue other than our earnings. Many, if not most, of the things we thought of or that government offered to us seemed attractive. In the years following the Second World War, it was easy, for a while at least, to overlook the price tag. Our income more than doubled in the 25 years after the war. We increased our take-home pay in those 25 years by more than we had amassed in all the preceding 150 years put together. Yes, there was some inflation, 1 or 1.5% a year. That didn't bother us. But if we look back at those golden years, we recall that even then, voices had been raised warning that inflation, like radioactivity, was cumulative and that once started, it could get out of control. Some government programs seemed so worthwhile that borrowing to fund them didn't bother us. By 1960, our national debt stood at $284 billion. Congress in 1971 decided to put a ceiling of $400 billion on our ability to borrow. Today, the debt is $934 billion. So-called temporary increases or extensions in the debt ceiling have been allowed 21 times in these 10 years. And now, I've been forced to ask for another increase in the debt ceiling, or the government will be unable to function past the middle of February. I've only been here 16 days. Before we reach the day when we can reduce the debt ceiling, we may, in spite of our best efforts, see a national debt in excess of $1 trillion. Now, this is a figure that's literally beyond our comprehension. We know now that inflation results from all that deficit spending. Government has only two ways of getting money other than raising taxes. It can go into the money market and borrow, competing with its own citizens and driving up interest rates, which it has done, or it can print money, and it's done that. Both methods are inflationary. We're victims of language. The very word inflation leads us to think of it as just high prices. Then, of course, we resent the person who puts on the price tags, forgetting that he or she is also a victim of inflation. Inflation is not just high prices. It's a reduction in the value of our money. When the money supply is increased, but the goods and services available for buying are not, we have too much money chasing too few goods. Wars are usually accompanied by inflation. Everyone is working or fighting, but production is of weapons and munitions, not things we can buy and use. Now, one way out would be to raise taxes so that government need not borrow or print money. That in all these years of government growth, we've reached, indeed surpassed, the limit of our people's tolerance or ability to bear an increase in the tax burden. Prior to World War II, taxes were such that, on the average, we only had to work just a little over 1 month each year to pay our total federal, state, and local tax bills. Today, we have to work 4 months to pay that bill. Some say shift the tax burden to business and industry, but business doesn't pay taxes. Well, don't get the wrong idea. Business is being taxed so much so that we're being priced out of the world market. But business must pass its cost of operations, and that includes taxes, on to the customer in the price of the product. Only people pay taxes, all the taxes. Government just uses business in a kind of sneaky way to help collect the taxes. They're hidden in the price. We aren't aware of how much tax we actually pay. Today, this once great industrial giant of ours has the lowest rate of gain in productivity of virtually all the industrial nations with whom we must compete in the world market. We can't even hold our own market here in America against foreign automobiles, steel, and a number of other products. Japanese production of automobiles is almost twice as great per worker as it is in America. Japanese steelworkers outproduce their American counterparts by about 25%. Now, this isn't because they're better workers. I'll match the American working man or woman against anyone in the world. But we have to give them the tools and equipment that workers in the other industrial nations had. We invented the assembly line and mass production. But punitive tax policies and excessive and unnecessary regulations, plus government borrowing, have stifled our ability to update plant and equipment. When capital investment is made, it's too often for some unproductive alterations demanded by government to meet various of its regulations. Excessive taxation of individuals has robbed us of incentive and made overtime unprofitable. We once produced about 40% of the world's steel. We now produce 19%. We were once the greatest producer of automobiles, producing more than all the rest of the world combined. That is no longer true. And in addition, the big three, the major auto companies in our land, have sustained tremendous losses in the past year and have been forced to lay off thousands of workers.